Well, thank you so much, Chair Crew. We sincerely appreciate all the work that goes into just making this room as comfortable it is for us. And so, again, hopefully we'll get to continue to see more highlights of all the great things that God is doing in and through you all here at Calvary Bible Church. As we continue our series in the book of Jonah, I'm going to ask that you would turn to Jonah, and we'll be in chapter 2 this morning. And we'll continue where we left off last week, where Jonah fled the presence of the Lord and did not want to see God spare the people of Nineveh. So he tried to ghost the Lord, and it didn't work out so well, as he ended up on a ship that the Lord sent a great sea storm to break the ship apart, and he was fearing for his life, and the sailors were fearing for their lives. And so Jonah was thrown overboard where we left him off last week. And so this morning we'll continue to see God's great mercy and grace towards Jonah. And so let's just take a moment and read chapter 1, verse 17, and all of the remaining part of chapter 2 as we start together this morning. In verse 17, chapter 1, "And the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord, his God, from the belly of the fish, saying, I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the flood surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. Then I said, I am driven away from your sight, yet I shall again look upon your holy temple. The waters closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. The weeds were wrapped around my head. At the roots of the mountains I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit. O Lord my God, when I was fainting away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple. Those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love. But I, with the voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. And the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah up out upon the dry land." And let's just take a moment and pray together this morning. Father, we are so thankful for your work and grace in our lives. We're thankful for the experience that Jonah had, that we may learn from it, Lord, that we may learn about ourselves, but more importantly, we may learn about your character and your compassionate and steadfast love for people who often are wayward. Lord, let us learn from Jonah's psalm of prayer this morning, and may we heed the wisdom that you have for each of us, that we may change and we may turn towards you this morning. We pray this in your name. Amen. Last night, my wife and I got to go on a date with a couple of our friends, and we went to this place that has laser tag, which was like epic. I mean, a 35-year-old playing laser tag, right? That's pretty fun. But they have this kind of like skywalk thing there, and we first experienced this place when my son Miles got to go for a birthday party that one of his classmates had set up, and they have this whole contraption that tethers you to this like safety harness, and you climb up to this stairs, and it's like in the basically like this space here where everything's kind of up in the ceiling, and you're walking in the ceiling, and you're looking down on all this stuff going on around you. And so when you're standing on the ground, you're like, oh, that looks really fun. But when a 10-year-old gets up there on the harness and sees that there's this like little rope that he's supposed to walk across to get from station to station, or there's these little rope ladders that they're supposed to climb on, and then eventually gets you to this like zip line contraption that just like you swing around the whole building space. And so he got up there and right away was like, I'm not sure I made a good decision. but I'm going to keep going. And so I'm down and I'm watching him and I'm just trying to encourage him because somehow he ended up in like the front of the line. So like all his classmates are like, let's go, move along, come on. And so he's feeling the pressure to continue on and making a decision that he probably was questioning at the moment. But he kept going, and each station, the obstacle course kind of gets more difficult or risky. Right? And so there's not like tension that you feel like you're safe to the harness. You don't really realize it. It's behind you. And so you kind of get this sense that like, I could fall at any moment to my death. And hopefully my dad catches me, right? So he's walking through and he gets to the final station. And there's an attendant up there, and she makes sure all the kids get on there and they push them on their way. And I'm just encouraging him, like, go through with it, you'll get there, go through with it. And he gets to the edge, and she almost tried to, like, push him, but he was like, no, I'm not having it. And he decides in his mind, he's like, nope, I have to turn back. And I'm like, no, go, you can do it. I'm the world telling him, yeah, you can do it. And he's like, nope, this is not a good idea for me. This is violating my conscience. And he turned around. And sure enough, she had to come up with a way to move his harness around so that all the other kids could go past. And then he had to make his way and turn back. And it was hard because you got to go through all that obstacle course to get back to solid ground. But he was thrilled that he was able to make a different decision and come back to safe ground. And I think that for many of us, we can get caught in our lives going through life and making decisions that we think maybe this is a good idea, but then as we go through the motions, we realize, no, this decision wasn't a great idea. Maybe we didn't really examine the risk or the implications that it had for us. And just like Miles, I want us to know that it's never too late to turn from our sin and turn back to our great God. The great security of the ground was a sigh of relief for him. And for us, being in fellowship and walking in obedience with the Lord is our safe ground. And I want us to remember that as we read through Jonah's prayer this morning, because Scripture contains countless examples of individuals who walk in disobedience, and they experience what I like to call God's rugged grace. A grace that is committed and introduces new opportunities for repentance in order that God's people would return to him. And oftentimes we tend to think of God's pursuit of us as tender. We hear of there's the Lord leaves the 99 to go get the one, and he's this tender shepherd and cares for us as his tender sheep, and he's all kind of kind. But if you ever watch real shepherds, they don't carry a staff so that they can coddle their sheep. They carry a staff so they can whack them. And sometimes we need God's rugged grace like we need a staff in the face. Like, it's just the reality. And Jonah is a perfect example of this rugged grace that says, no, stop going in the wrong direction. Come back towards me. And so, while God is tender, he is also very serious about rebellion. And we see this in the story of Jonah. And Jonah chapter 2 provides this beautiful example of God's grace and the power of prayer in the sinner's life. And so I asked this question to you last week, and I'm going to pose it to you again. As we go through the book of Jonah, I want to ask ourselves, who do you want to be? Who do you want? Who are you? How do you make choices? How do you anchor yourself to the person of God? Oftentimes we define ourselves, we look at our identity based on our vocation or maybe our ethnicity or our social class status. But Jonah lets us understand that who we are is so much more. It's about who God is and how we respond to who God is. And so as we look at Jonah's prayer, he's been swallowed by this fish. And the Lord, again, I love how the text here reads, because again, it talks about God's power and control. And right off the bat, I want to remind you that God is in control. We like to believe that we are, but let's remind ourselves reading this text that God is the one who is in control. And right off we see, and the Lord appointed, okay? God of the universe tells a great fish, hey, this guy that is just thrown overboard into this raging sea needs some help. And so God could have sent Jonah a nice buoy or a log to hold on to and, float back to land. But he chose in his rugged grace to lovingly correct Jonah with a big fish swallowing him. Okay, I'm a big Star Wars fan, and so I kind of liken this to Boba Fett being swallowed by the Sarlacc pit, where the he's going to be digested over like 10,000 years, according to Star Wars lore, right? And so it's like the biblical Sarlacc pit, swallows Jonah whole, and he's going to be digested by this fish, right? That's God's rugged grace rescuing Jonah here. And so Jonah is in the belly of the fish, and he's having some time to contemplate, probably, to reflect on his decisions, to reflect on, I'm up here, and I'm not sure this harness is working, and this was the wrong choice. Maybe I should stop ghosting the Lord and have a conversation with him, and let him know, I hear you, Lord, message received, I'm going to repent. And so we have plenty to learn here from Jonah's response. But sometimes we get caught on the details of this story that we kind of gloss over Jonah's prayer. A lot of times I like to get caught up on details like how do you survive in the belly of a fish for 3 days? Or was this fish a whale or a shark whale? Or, and I'm trying to rationalize in my kind of, human scientific understanding. But I don't want us to get caught up on looking so hard at the great fish that we miss our great God. Don't miss out on what the story is about. The story isn't about the fish. The story is about God. It's about our relationship with God. And it's about how Jonah experiences God's character, and his response is prayer. You see, prayer has changing power. It reminds, it corrects, and it nurtures hope within our souls. And so the wisdom that we can see from Jonah's experiences is not just seeing the character of God, but how he responds to the character of God. And so we, like Jonah, should be a people who pray. We, like Jonah, should see this text and ask ourselves, am I praying prayers like this? Am I reflecting on God's character in the circumstances of my life? And am I responding? Am I taking the time to think and to pray? Because I think many times we don't. Many times we just move on with the stuff that's going on in our day-to-day routines. And so Jonah prays here out of distress. I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. You ever been in a season of life where things are good, and so we don't think about praying to the Lord because stuff is fine? Most of us as humans, we pray to God when we feel like we need something or when things aren't going well. A few weeks back, my family got the neurovirus, which is like the stomach bug. And so that's the virus where it basically tells your body to discharge all food and liquids from whatever available function it can. And it is brutal. And so praying over a porcelain bowl in distress, I remember thinking, Lord, if this is the end for me, which it felt like it might have been in those moments, it was a lot of pain, saying, Lord, please take this away from me or let me die. I was ready. I was in so much discomfort. And so I can't even imagine Jonah being in the belly of a fish, feeling this distress, having this difficulty going on in his human experience where he's able to pause and reconcile, okay, my choices made me end up here. I'm partially responsible. And so he recognized that he was on the verge of what could have been death. I don't know whether he knew that God was saving him through being swallowed by a fish, but he had already wrestled or faced the fact that he was going to get thrown into the sea by these sailors and that death was most likely on his horizon. See, acknowledging our mortality puts our need to repent in dire context. When we recognize that our lives could end at any moment, we recognize, man, I'm going to be face to face with God soon, and so I want to make sure I know where I'm going. I want to make sure that my relationship is right with the Lord. Now is the time. And so this is wisdom for us to recognize that you may not be in the belly of a fish right now, but your life could end at any moment. And so how are you in the Lord? How's your relationship with God? Do you feel like you've repented from your sins? Have you placed your faith and hope and trust in the God who saves? Jonah is getting to process and look through all of this. You see, Jonah knows that God put him there, yet he hopes to dwell with God. As we read verses 3 and 4, "For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the flood surrounds me, and all your waves and your billows passed over me." He recognizes that God is in control, that God is putting him in this fish belly pressure cooker to try to change him. And he sees all of that, and yet he still has hope that he gets to dwell with God. "Then I said, I am driven away from your sight, yet I shall again look upon your holy temple." He has hope. His prayer is reminding him of what God is doing and ultimately what he hopes will happen. Jonah acknowledges his impending doom and God's mercy. As we read in verse 5, "The waves closed in over me to take my life." He recognizes again his own mortality. "The deep surrounded me. The weeds were wrapped about my head and at the roots of the mountains. I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit, O Lord my God." See, Jonah acknowledges his impending doom and God's mercy, that God was merciful to him. And I love the poetry in this book that we kind of miss out on in the English language. But when you read through chapters 1 and 2, you'll continue to see this language of the word down. And so Jonah went down, and he went from Tarshish, and then he went down into the boat. And then he's reflecting, and he's saying, I'm going down to Sheol, and I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me, right? He's at the roots of the mountains. And so this is communicating that he was running from the presence of the Lord. And so spiritually, he's trying to get as far away from God as he can. Down, down, down. It reminds me of that the little poem in J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit, down, down, down to Goblin Land. And the dwarves fall into this cavern, and they're getting stuck down there. And they can't escape the caverns where all the goblins are until someone comes and rescues them. And so Gandalf shows up, the great wizard, and he rescues all these dwarves and brings them back up to freedom. And so the text here says, Jonah's acknowledging, I went down, down, down. And then all of a sudden it shifts gears. At the end of verse 6, he says, "Yet you brought up my life from the pit." You see, recognizing that we cannot save ourselves is essential for a right relationship with God. Our modern culture wrestles with the concept of grace, because grace is a gift that is offered to us that we don't deserve, that we've done nothing to earn. And in a culture that says, believe in yourself, use these different strategies for your self-help, which self-help is flawed, right? You see, modern culture makes the offer of grace unnecessary or even is offended by grace because it says that I can't do this on my own. And Jonah recognizes that I can do nothing apart from the God who's going to save me. I love how Tim Keller says this in his book on the book of Jonah. He says, we must admit not only our sins, but also that we cannot repair or cleanse ourselves from them. It's not just enough that we acknowledge, yes, I'm a sinner, but we have to recognize that the solution to our sin is not our power, is not our will, but is the person and work of God. And we see that through the Lord Jesus. And Jonah is seeing this, and he's beginning to wrestle with his own self-righteousness. Look with me at verse 8 and 9. Those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love. But I, with a voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. You see, oftentimes we trust in worldly idols, just like those who pay regard to vain idols. They're looking for their hope or their security or their power in other things. Now, you may not have a little statue in your house that you are praying to or worshiping, but I promise you that there are things in your life that have become idols, that you are placing your hope or your security in, or maybe even thinking that these are the things that are going to save me. Maybe that's a relationship. Maybe that's your wealth. Maybe that's your status or your job or career path. Some kind of title. You see, worldly strategies are built for us to take control of our life. Seize the day, control your destiny. And Jonah recognizes that the Lord is in control. And that when we look towards worldly idols, when we look to vain idols, we are, what the text says, forsaking their hope of steadfast love. And this word in the Hebrew is hesed, which is God's loyal love. And this loyal love is deep. This is not just this steadfast love, but this is a loyal love that says, I am going to go to whatever lengths that I can to maintain my loyalty to you. I will chase after you. I will send a storm to bring you back. I will send a fish to swallow you up, to give you opportunity to stop, pause, and turn. And this is a loyal, loving God, slow to anger. And yet we're willing to forsake that kind of love for a vain idol, for something else that we are convinced is going to give us security or purpose or significance. And we forsake the God, as Hebrews says, who has promised to never leave us or forsake us. The God who says, there's nothing that you could ever do that would make me love you any less. It's so funny how we as Christians are often willing to ignore God's hesed for something else that's shiny or attractive in life. Heed Jonah's example. And I think Jonah, as he's reflecting and he's working through this, the irony is that he's placed his own security in vain idols. Remember last week we talked that Jonah didn't agree with God's assessment that Nineveh was worthy to be saved. He did not want God to rescue his enemies. And so because he felt that God was wrong, he chose to leave. He felt that he knew better than God. He placed his hope in his nationality, being a Hebrew, or that he was a prophet. And even when confronted by the sailors, his response was one of pride. And so Jonah, again, knew lots of truth about God's character, but the irony is that he was spiritually unaware. He lacked self-awareness spiritually. You see, it is possible to know God and his truth and simultaneously lack spiritual self-awareness. We can lack awareness that we have allowed idols into our life. We can be blinded by the things that we've accepted in our lives that are far from the heart of God, that are not helping us walk towards God, but that are pulling us from him. And we can sometimes be convinced that these things are good and true. I'm thankful my wife and I have some good and godly friends in our lives that we get together with, and we just encourage one another in our marriage and in our walk with the Lord. And we were talking through a season of how, we were communicating and not understanding one another. And oftentimes as couples, we can get in these discussions where we make these kind of like absolute statements and there's something that we feel, and then we make the statement that they're absolutely true. And so our friends said, try this statement out when you're interacting with each other. They said, try saying, well, honey, the story that I'm telling myself is that you are not respecting my time right now, right? And so I'm right off the bat acknowledging that what I feel may not be objectively true. The story that we tell ourselves is that, well, this thing is okay, or this thing is good, or God doesn't mind. And so acknowledging that allows us in our own growth and processing of maturing as believers is to acknowledge that our flesh and in our human mind, that we're not always objective, that we're not always anchored to God's word in how we live and how we make decisions or how we process or how we even think about where we're at in the world. And Jonah, I think, lacked self-awareness. He lacked awareness of God's character, and he lacked awareness of his own choices and how they had gotten him there, or even his own pride issues that we're going to see in chapters 3 and 4 are going to continue. That he's repenting, in one sense, here in the belly of the whale, but we're going to see that as his life choices continue, that he's still wrestling with his own vain idols, his own self-righteousness. And so seeing Jonah pray is an important discipline for us because prayer fosters spiritual self-awareness anchored in the character of God. As we are praying, as we come to the Lord, we're saying, Lord, you know what? There's a whole bunch of things that I'm telling myself are true, but they may not be. I may be reading this whole situation wrong. And so I need you, the author and perfecter of my faith, the author of absolute truth, who has given us his word, to reshape how I'm thinking, to tune my heart to sing thy praise as we sang this morning. It acknowledges that we are not in control, that we are not the master of the universe. We are not in control of the world, and that we may be wrong. And for Jonah, he struggles with this, as we're going to find out next couple weeks, is that there's a difference between simply fleeing the consequences of our sin and taking responsibility for them. And oftentimes, if I'm in the belly of a whale, I definitely say, yep, I don't want this consequence anymore, Lord. I will turn. I will obey. Yep, I do not want the consequence anymore. But my heart's attitude, the disposition I have towards God's command still may not be right. I still may not be taking responsibility for my actions, because Jonah, what's missing in his prayer is any acknowledgement of his sin. He doesn't name it and claim it and say, Lord, I disobeyed and I walked away from you. He doesn't say that. He definitely acknowledges God's character. He definitely acknowledges God's mercy. And he doesn't want to be in the circumstance that he is in. He acknowledges his position. He acknowledges his mortality. But he doesn't take responsibility for his sin, that he sinned against an almighty God. Don't just run from your consequences. Understand that we have to acknowledge our sin, because when we minimize our sin, we minimize God's work of salvation. If we say, well, my sin really wasn't a big deal, then I'm just going to sin that grace may abound, because you know what? Jesus dying on the cross so that we could have a relationship with God, it's a small thing. My sin's not that big. You don't realize the connection oftentimes when we minimize our sin. The importance is understanding how wonderful and glorious God's hesed, his loyal love towards us is because when we're able to see our sin, we see, oh my goodness, I have violated this relationship. I have offended a holy God. And then that therefore makes his love for us all the greater. That he could see us as enemies of God, people who would be someone he would rescue. And this is Jonah. the disobedient prophet who runs from the person and character of the Lord. You see, he couldn't rescue himself. I love Ephesians 2, 8, and 9, and it's just a very well-known passage, but let's turn there because it's worth it. Ephesians 2, 8 and 9, it says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not of your own doing. It is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast." We don't get to boast in our nationality. We don't get to boast that we're saved and you're not saved. We don't get to boast in our works. We don't get to boast in anything that we've accomplished or our gifting or anything that God has chosen to entrust us with as stewards. No, we recognize that it is a gift from God, period. It's what God has done. That is where our salvation lies, just like Jonah. And so Jonah, as we turn back to chapter 2, and we read the end of this passage, he's finished his prayer. "But I, with the voice of thanksgiving," in verse 9, "will sacrifice to you what I have vowed I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord." See, Jonah didn't necessarily know about the cross, but he knew about the character of the Lord. He knew that salvation belongs to God. God is the one who saves, so that no one may boast, as Ephesians says. And then again, I love how this section of the story is bookended. We started at the beginning that the Lord appointed the fish to swallow Jonah. And then in verse 10, "And the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah out upon the dry land." You see, the Lord is in control. Again, God is in control. And God positions Jonah in a place where he can obey. He spits him on dry land and gives him the opportunity by his grace and his mercy to say, guess what? You can now go obey my command to go to Nineveh and call them to repent. So in this prayer, we've learned quite a bit about God's character. You see, the gospel is God coming after us, not us coming after him. Jonah ran from him, right? God is not just after us to come into a relationship with him, but also to remain in fellowship with him. You see, being a Christian is being a follower of Jesus. This isn't I'm going to pray a prayer once so I can get my get out of hell free card. This is a decision that I'm going to follow God and be in fellowship with him. That my saving faith has brought me into a fellowship that is the most important thing in my existence. Being in fellowship with God. And we have the opportunity to remember the significance of God's work this morning. We have the opportunity to remember the sacrifice of Jesus. See, Matthew 12, Jesus compares himself to Jonah. And he said, Jesus, just like Jonah, had 3 days. Jesus was dead, raised from the dead on our behalf, so that we may have fellowship with God. You see, we couldn't save ourselves, and God sent his Son. He who knew no sin became sin that we might become the righteousness of God. And so this morning, as the men come forward for communion, I want us to reflect on God's character. I want us to remember God's saving work in our lives. You may be running like Jonah now. There may be stuff in your life that you don't want to acknowledge. There may be sin in your life that's not dealt with. There may be a story that you're telling yourself. And this is a great opportunity to pause and to reflect on God's character, to reflect on God's truth for us, that we could be renewed and changed. See, that's what God wants for us, is change. He doesn't want us to remain dead in our trespasses, but he wants us to be alive in Christ. And so communion is an opportunity for us to reflect on the person and the work of Jesus, a man who knew no sin, who became fully man, fully God, and became the propitiation for our sins. And take time to reflect on that work. Take time to reflect on your relationship with God. See, there's an opportunity for you right now to turn. You're sitting in this room, not in the belly of a fish. Take that as the first step of opportunity to thank the Lord. But you have an opportunity right now to go before God and remember and to run towards him, not away from him. So let's take a moment before the elements are passed out, and let's pray together. And let's remember God's work and love towards us. Father, we thank you for your hesed, your loyal love. There's so many things that have gone on in our lives that we may have not been loyal. Where we've gotten it wrong. We've told ourselves things that aren't true, and we've believed them and lived them. And you continue to come after us. We thank you for your sacrifice. And we thank you that you continue to pursue fellowship with us. For those of us who know you, that you're not done with us, that you're not done changing us. And so we remember you, and we remember your sacrifice, and we remember your work. We remember that you've never left us or forsake us. Help us today as we participate in this wonderful, wonderful sacrament. We pray this in your name. Amen.